Alright, I'm going to show you how to make a toe up ankle sock. Very basic pattern. I'm going to use the magic cast on. Now originally when I showed the magic cast on my tutorials, I wasn't sure that it could actually be done with a round loom, but I found out I could do it with a round loom, so I'm going to show you how to do that on a round loom. And I'm going to use a 36 peg loom. And so there's a formula that I have, and I originally did it for me, but I decided I'll do one for my son. So he usually uses a 36 peg loom, and so that's the number of pegs I'll do is a 36 peg. And so my cuff, because I'm doing toe up, mostly what I'm concerned about right now is actually doing the toe first, okay? And what you normally do is you take your number of pegs, you divide it by 2, which gives you half the loom of what you're going to use. So me doing 36, it's going to be 18 pegs. You divide it by 3, and of course that's 6. So we're going to be decreasing down to 6, and we're going to have 6 wraps and turns or whatnot on either side. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to do yarn over on this one. I'm kind of trying to change up into short row options. You can do whatever short row you're comfortable with, but I'm kind of going to show you the options. So we're going to do yarn over with this pattern. Okay, so we're going to have 6 yarn overs on both sides with 6 single stitches in the middle. That's what that means. So we're going to decrease down to that and increase out. And then we're going to add the stitches back. So that's kind of how you get your toe calculations. Alright, so you do the number of pegs divided by 2, which is half the loom, which you're going to be using half your pegs. Then you divide that by 3, because you're going to do a third to decrease down to. And then and that's what the B times 2 is total number of decreases is. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And as we go along, I will explain the math of each section. Now, I'm going to be doing the magic cast on, so I need paracord. And this is a wonderful technique that Janae Yagi with Smitten Kittens does. It's brilliant. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take and put the paracord over the top of the working yarn right now. Okay, so paracord over working yarn, then wrap the working yarn in front of the starting peg, then go up under the paracord, back over the top of the paracord, and wrap to the front of the next peg. Up under the paracord, over the paracord, wrap in front of the next peg. Up under and over in front of the next peg. Under the paracord, over the paracord, in front of the next peg. And you're going to do this for 18, okay? You can do this for 18 pegs, so you're going to go half, which is why you need to know what your half your loom is. And you're going to do this for 18, so and you have to do it a little differently on a circular loom, okay, but it's not much differently. You have to allow yourself some extra room to be able to add the stitches over on the other side, and actually may be easier on a smaller loom like this than it is on a bigger loom, but I have done it on a bigger loom. So I'm just letting you know that this is definitely possible. It's just showing you how to do it. I usually just pull my paracord through. Okay, so we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 2 more. 17. And one more is 18. And when you get to that last one, you will go back and wrap it up and over again. but this time you're going to start knitting back the other direction, okay? And you're going to knit all the way back, and that gets you your starting cast on. So you're going to knit that first peg. All right, you're going to knit all the way back. And I promise you, this is even easier than the Kitchener, and there's less waste yarn. It's brilliant. Smitten Kittens, check out her YouTube channel. She's another one. You want to get some more advanced techniques going. She's great, and she has some nifty ideas on how to do things. All right. So we knit all the way back, and that gets your cast on. So that's the magic cast on, as I call it. All right, so now what you want to do is you want to start with the peg you finished with, all right, and you're going to knit it, okay. So you're going to knit it. All right, now we're going to start our wraps and turns. So we're going to knit our way over. So you kind of get your prep. So you're going to knit your way over till just before the last peg. All right. And the other option you can do, if you're not so sure, that you can go like 2 extra, so you can have an overlapping stitch. All right, so that's another option, is to do 2 extra than what you started with. So I'm going to lift that up because we're doing a yarn over method. We're going to send it from the back to the front and place that stitch back onto the loom. Then you're going to start working back the other direction. All right, that is a yarn over, and that's what technique we're going to use on this. Now, the yarn over method I've seen used a lot by the KB designers. Okay, so if you've done KB socks, you've done the yarn over a lot. It's not my preferred. I prefer my just typical wrap and turn over the top. It's one less movement step. I find it's a little tighter, but it's always what I say, whatever works for you, you do it, okay? All right, so yarn over method. All right, so you're going to lift up that stitch. All right, you're going to wrap that working yarn behind the peg and in front, and then place that stitch back on the peg. Okay. All right, now that is your yarn over. I'm going to pull that through. Okay, now we're just really getting started. We're going to, depending on what you're doing, you're going to get down to your third. So I'm going to try and get 6 yarn overs on each side with 6 yarn overs single. I'll show you one more time how to set your yarn over up. Now, if you don't like the yarn over method, you can do the German short row method with the half pull, or you can do your wrap and turn. You can do any of the methods I show. There's 7 different methods you can do. You can even do a twin knit, which I find is really tight, but not as tight as the German short row. Okay, so you lift that up, take it behind the peg, put the stitch back, and go in front of the peg. All right. And then you're going to knit your way to the other side. I'll show you one more time. I'm going to leave you to get your short rowing down to where you need it. Now, if you are wanting to do a 50 peg loom, I can give you the calculations for that if you don't want to have to calculate, since that's an adult size loom and my circumference is a 9. Kind of an average size, so you can always use mine. So you're going to lift that stitch up, take the working yarn behind, and put the stitch back on and in front. Okay, so go ahead and yarn over your way down to your middle pegs. Okay, And if you are wanting to do a 50 peg loom, you are going to want to decrease down to 9, and you should have 8 yarn overs on each side. Okay, so if you're doing that, you want to do half the pegs, which is 25. So you want to magic cast on 25 stitches, and if you're unsure if it'll make it to the other half, you can do 2 more and have an overlapping stitch. Okay, and that just gives you a couple extra rows. But what you want to do is you want to do the magic cast on for 25, and then you do your 1 row back and then knit 1 and then start your yarn over method, and you're going to have 8 yarn overs on either side, which is a total of 16 with 9 in the middle if you're wanting to do the 50 peg method. Okay, so pause the video, get your decreasing down, and then I'll show you the increasing, and then I'll show you how to connect the half to where you have it closed. Okay, so I have my 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 singles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and doubles again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I've stopped on that 6, okay, in the middle, because what I like to do, and this isn't what normally is shown to do, but I find it actually helps with the whole problem. Alright, I'm starting with the peg I finished, and I'm going to knit my way back to 6. Alright, so I'm going to knit 6. Alright, and then when I get to my yarn over, I'm going to knit the 2 together, and instead of slipping the stitch, I actually knit it. Alright, so I'm going to knit it and then knit my way over. Alright, and for some reason I find that you have less holes showing. Alright, so you get to your next yarn over, you knit the 2 together. But now typically when it's shown, they slip it, and I find if I slip it, I get a hole. So it's up to you. You can slip it. As I said, this is a kind of do what you like. If you like a method, do it. Alright, I'm just kind of showing different options with these different socks. Things you can do in different ways. So as you can see, I'm going over to my next yarn over, and then I'm knitting the 2 together. I'm starting with that peg I finished with and working my way over to the next yarn over and knitting those 2 together. Go ahead and pause the video and get your yarn overs added back in, and then we will go in and I will show you how to go in and add your magic cast on, as I will call it. Alright, so pause the video and we'll move on from there. Okay, I've added all my yarn overs all the way back over to here. Alright, and when you start stretching it out, you should start seeing, you should be able to get it over. Now if you're wondering what yarn I'm using, I'm actually using Patent Stretch Sock, and I'm using 2 strands at the same time. I kind of figured out general guide, pulling from the center what colors are going to be about the same, and it's working out perfectly so far. But lately I've gotten to a point where all I want to use is the stretch yarn, because I find that all the ones I've made so far, there's no way it feels like it's coming off my foot. And that's been a complaint that my son has. He loves the socks I make for him, but it's a complaint. And so I wanted to solve that problem, because he does like the socks, and make it to where he'd enjoy wearing the socks without them slipping off his foot. So I've actually solved that problem. So what you want to do now is you want to add these stitches to the other half of the loom. Okay, and I'm going to start with this side, and I'm going to pull out the paracord, grab that, and put it on the loom. Alright, and now I'm going to find my next stitch to pull out the paracord and put it on the loom. And I'm going to do this all the way across, where I take out the paracord and put it on the loom. Okay, and you're going to find that you don't want it twisted. You want it to be as flat as possible. and I'll try to show you that when I get a little further in. Okay, so as you can see, and see if I can get the camera to focus, you can see there's no twist there. That's how you want it to go onto the loom. Okay, you don't want a twist. Alright, so just going to go in and pull out the paracord as you go along, and you can kind of pull it out more like this if you want to make it a little easier. It's pulling out the paracord that actually takes more time, but in general you don't have the waste yarn. You really don't, which is brilliant. That's what I love about it. Pull out, make sure it's not twisted, and pull on. You can and do you know the further here you get, the tighter it's going to be. Okay, alright, so we're going to grab that, pull the paracord out, make sure it's not twisted, and put it onto the next peg. Alright, so this does show that you can do this without having to, you want to try to get that hook in there and put it on there, and a stitch got dropped. It's alright, and just pull it onto the peg. Alright, that's how you save a stitch. Not a big deal. You catch it, weave it in. Alright, and I'll have a video on that where I've done it. And usually that's where you drop your stitches, is when you're doing this, when you're adding stitches from something else, is when you end up dropping them. Alright, and as you can see, we're getting into a more tighter area, and you want to stick that hook up in there if possible. And I'm not going to say this isn't more of a challenge when you start working with a round loom, but there's many that don't want to work with the long looms. Okay, grab that, okay, that one looks kind of twisted, so we'll make sure it's not twisted. Oops. Okay, make sure it's not twisted and put it up there. Alright, and it is going to look really stretched. That's what it's going to look like. Alright, don't expect any less. Pull the paracord through there, pull the paracord through, grab it, put it on the loom. Always trying to stick that hook through first, because you don't want to go chasing. I know I personally don't want to go chasing. Alright, you stick it on that next one. 3 more stitches, oh my goodness. Almost have it. There. Pick up that one. Take it off the paracord. Put it there. And take off the paracord, and I'll catch that stitch. We'll put it right there. Okay, and as you can see, they are at it. Alright, now what I do from this point, and make sure that your working yarn isn't under any of this. Make sure it's out of the way. So what you want to do is you just want to knit your way over. Alright, and oops, put that back on there. Okay, your way over. And that gets it set up. Now, when you're done, if you want it a little snugger, you can actually go in and try snugging it up when you're done with the sock. Gently going in and doing that, if you choose. If you want it to be on the bottom, because it's loose but you don't want to bother with it, you do the heel on the opposite half. So you'll do it on this half. That's a trick. Alright, so we did the toe on this half. When you go to do the heel, if you want this to be on the bottom, do it on this half. If you don't want it to show and you don't have to go in and tighten it. Alright, but that is how you do your magic cast on and add it to a circular loom. Again, it is more stretched, as you can see. Not a big deal there. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to work on the instep. Alright, and that's where you take your rows per inch and you times it by your instep, which is, see if I have a diagram in here I can show how you decide that. Okay, you see here, it's in this area, and you'll notice that the foot tends to change, and then just below the toe. Okay, just barely below the toe and just barely past the heel, you do a measurement like that. And with my son, I believe it ends up being like 4 inches, so it's 44 rows. And I like him to have some support, so I'm going to do actually a rib stitch for 44 rows. Okay, so I'm going to knit 3 and purl 3 for a total of 44 rows. Okay, and you can do straight up stockinette if you want, so you can do just knit if you want all the way around for however many rows. So my length of my foot is like 9.25 inches. Okay, so if you are wanting to do, say, the 50, you will need to do 55 rows, I believe. Let me make sure. Instep, yes, 55 rows if it's 5 inches. Okay, however many inches times 11, because that's what the general swatch shows up when you use 2 fingering weights together in the 1/4 inch gauge. Okay, you typically get 11 stitches per inch, and you typically get 11 rows per inch, and then you typically get 5.5 stitches per inch, and that's a mid stretch. That's not stationary, and that's not completely stretched. That's the mid stretch. On 2 strands of fingering weight at the same time with a 1/4 inch gauge. That gives you a general idea. Okay, so generally I would say 11 times whatever your number is, and for me it would have been 55 rows, and for my son it's 44 rows. So again, I'm going to do a rib stitch. You can do stockinette, which is just straight knit. It's up to you. I'm going to do a 3x3, knit 3, purl 3. You can do knit 3, purl 2 if you have divisible by 5. It just depends on your preference. So I'm going to tell you, pause your video and get your instep done, and then we will come back and we will work the heel. Okay, and then I'll explain how you get your cuff area and how that calculates up. But that's how you do the magic cast on. And as you can see, it's a little loose, but you can go in and tighten it up a little, gently go in and tighten it up after you're done with the sock, and it can hide it. But most likely what I'm going to do is do my heel on the opposite side and not worry about it. So, alright. Pause the video, get your instep done, and then we will come back and I will show you how to do the heel. Alright, so you can either do straight knit for however many rows you need to do, or you can do the knit 3, purl 3 if you're doing the 36 peg, or you can do knit 3, purl 2 if you're doing the 50 peg. It's entirely up to you what you want to do with that. Alright, I have completed my 44 rows, as you can see, and I'm ready to start my heel. And you're going to end up doing your heel the same way, unless you want to do it the opposite side. to where your cast on is. If you don't feel like you like your cast on very well, you can put it on the underside, and I'll show you how that's done. So we're looking at ankle socks, and so you want to do exactly what you did with the toe. So I'll show you how to do that, and then I'll tell you how to measure the cuff. Alright, so I did my toe on this side. I'm going to do the heel on the other side. Okay, you can do it on the same side if you want. If you don't like your cast on, you don't think it looks as good, you can do it on the opposite side, or you can do it on the same side. Okay, I'm going to do it on the opposite side. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to keep up with my rib stitch that I'm doing. You can do this all stockinette. You don't have to do this rib stitch. But when you keep up with your rib stitch, you're going to do a rib stitch for the ankle. You got to keep up with it on what you're doing. I'm going to do stockinette for the heel, but when I go back to do my cuff, I'm going to go back into a rib stitch. So I'm going to do my knit 3 and purl 3, and then when I get to my halfway point, then I'll go in and start doing stockinette. So okay, we've made our halfway point when we did our last 3 sets of purls here, so now we're just going to knit all the way over until just before the last peg. And remember, we're doing the yarn over method of our short row. Okay, we're stopping just before that last peg. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lift up that stitch, place it behind the peg, the working yarn behind the peg, put the stitch back on, and knit your way over. Now you're going to knit over, I believe it's 16, because this is 17, and then you want to be wrapping and turning 18. So here's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and then we will lift the next stitch. Alright, so we're going to lift that stitch off, that next stitch. We're going to put our working yarn behind the peg and back into front, and that's your yarn over. And now you're going to knit just before your last yarn over, and you're going to yarn over. Okay, so you're doing the exact same thing for the heel as you're doing for the toe, and you can kind of figure out what you're doing from here, because it's going to work exact same way as you did on the other side of the loom. You're just doing it on this half. Okay, so it works out the same. So I'll show you one more time. Take that, there's our yarn over, so we're going to take this stitch off. Okay, we're going to take the yarn behind the peg, put the stitch back on, and then we're going to work our way to the other side. Okay, and I'll show you that one, and then I'm going to tell you to pause the video and follow if you need to. Go back to the beginning of the video to do your toe. Okay, you're just going to do the exact same thing for the heel, and I'll show you the last couple of rows finishing up. So you're going to go ahead and decrease down, increase out, and then I'll go in and show you the last couple of increase rows for your heel, and then we'll explain how to go about doing your cuff. Okay, so here's our next one. I'm gonna pull that off, take it behind the peg, put that back on, take in front, and keep going. So pause the video, get your heel done, and then we will move on to the cuff measurement, and you can see what we got going on here. Okay, I'm here at my last yarn over and my last yarn over, and what I'm going to do is go in and knit my way over. Now I wanted to also make a note, if you choose to do your heel on the same side as you did your toe, as you saw me do at the beginning, my knit 3, purl 3 halfway, you need to remember when you go and finish up your heel on the other half, that when you go to finish up the row by doing this half, that you need to keep with your knit 3, purl 3 that you've been doing, okay? And that will keep with the rib stitch, so there is absolutely no break whatsoever. Alright, so here's my last yarn over, and I'm gonna work my way back, and that completes my heel when I knit my way back over. And then I need to calculate my cuff, okay? Okay, so I've just finished my heel, as you can see. Alright, now I need to calculate my cuff. You go from the ankle bone to in between mid-calf and the ankle bone. You'll measure in between there, so it's in the middle of your calf, and your ankle bone. You'll measure halfway between, okay? And because I'm making these for my son, my measurement came to, it's 3 inches, okay? So when I go in to do this, I need to do 33 rows, because 11 rows per inch is what I get with this yarn when I'm doing 2 strands of stretch. And I will tell you, if you do 2 strands of stretch, you get even more spring than when you do just 1 strand of stretch. And if you do 1 strand of regular and 1 strand of stretch, you still get more spring when you're doing the fingering weight. So that's my suggestion, and you're going to get a sock that is not going to come off your foot while you're walking around. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Alright, now I need to do, and so you get your measurement, you times it by your rows per inch, whatever that might be with whatever yarn you're using, and then you do that many rows. And I would suggest rib stitch, okay? Well, because we're going toe up, I haven't exactly shown how to do my preferred bind off method when it comes to finishing up socks. And what I'm going to show you is a method that actually I saw from Loom Hat, and it's the modified bind off. Now, a lot of people will do the super stretchy bind off, but I think it looks tacky. Just my personal opinion, I think it looks a little sloppy. You do this beautiful sock and it looks sloppy. The modified bind off makes it look very neat and very clean, without giving you the stretch that you want as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to rib stitch, so whatever it might be, 3x2 or 2x2 or 3x3, which is what I'm doing here. Figure out what you're going to do, and you're going to do that rib stitching, and you're going to do it for however many rows you calculated. So for me, I'm going to be doing a total of 33 rows, okay, of rib stitch. So what you'll do is you'll pause the video, complete your 33 rows of rib stitch, or however many rows you calculated, and then I will show you the bind off method that I think is the best for finishing up a sock while keeping it looking neat and clean after you put all this work into it. So pause the video, get your rows done. I'll come back and show you a nice bind off that I got from Loom Hat. Okay, I've finished my cuff, and now it is time to bind off, and I will tell you when I do any toe up sock that I prefer the modified bind off, and I'm going to show you how that's done. This comes from Loom Hat, and I find it's the best one. It doesn't have the sloppy look, it's still very clean. So what you want to do is you want to knit the first peg, then the second peg. Then you want to move that second stitch over to the first peg, toss the bottom loop over, and move it over one. Then I like to bring it around the front and knit the first peg and the second peg. Take the second peg back to the first sock peg, toss the bottom loop over, move it over. Repeat this all the way around and you're done.